Alright, welcome back to Grad Lads. This is Samuel.
And this is Gabriel. This is going to be a short episode on Rick and Morty, just because in light of our science fiction and heresy/orthodoxy discussions, and also all the random digressions we've had on this show, I thought we should address it just because of the sheer quality of the writing and invention that goes into the show.
Certainly.
I know, Sam, you're a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been watching it?
You know, I did not watch them as they aired.
Uh-huh.
I did not have cable, and so I streamed them after they aired. Comedy Central posted them on their own website. You can just stream them.
Yeah.
So I watched them a few times then, and then I watched this last April 1st on April Fools. They aired the season 3 premiere, but without telling anybody, and they just marathon ran it over and over again. But on the cable menu, it would say different shows.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so they kind of just snuck it in.
Yeah.
So that one I've watched live, and I'll definitely probably DVR all the
right
in the future.
Right. And there's a new season coming out, which by the time anybody hears this podcast will probably have been out for some time, right?
Well, when is it airing?
I thought it's airing next month or something.
Is
or
it
this month?
Oh, I
think it's airing this month.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I think at the end.
Okay, very cool. Well, between that and Game of Thrones, I guess my some Sunday night viewings are taken up.
Yeah.
So how about you? Did you watch them as they came out?
No, I only just probably watched it 3 months ago for the first time.
Oh, wow.
I just had heard about it and watched a couple of episodes. Oh, they were doing a marathon of all the episodes in order.
Okay.
Online that I could watch, and so I watched a bunch of them, and I haven't seen anything close to all of them, but I have enough that I think I can talk about what I like about the show and what just I find radically disturbing about it.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
So I'm curious, first off, what do you like about the show?
Well, I guess in a general sense, it's like Back to the Future meets Doctor Who, but it's all thrown together with a bunch of acid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wild. It's the characters are really good. I mean, God, Jerry is so wonderfully pathetic. I really like. I like how also it's extremely well planned and thought out.
Okay.
And yet it's also ad-libbed. There, especially some of you can tell that some of the rants at the end of episodes, you can definitely tell that Rick they recorded in studio and they reanimated over it, or when they do the cable box shows, you can even hear them Roiland, and Harmon just laughing while they're doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that's fascinating to be able to have something so meticulously planned and detailed, and then also be able to seamlessly incorporate just the silliest ad-libbing. It's such good, ad-libbing, the words. You could hear a word and you'd be like, that belongs to that universe.
Yeah.
He's got his splorkdonks. And you're like, oh, that's totally a Rick and Morty word. I don't even know what it means, but it works.
Right.
Just being able to seamlessly incorporate and just, like you said, some very disturbing ideas with fart jokes.
Yeah.
Literal fart jokes.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. It does have that, je ne sais quoi. They're able to put something together in a way that I just think works, one of those things that if you tried to ever do it again, the variables would never come up right.
Yeah.
It just works. It's insane.
Well, one thing I like about the episodes I've seen is that they're very, very well versed in science fiction concepts.
Mhm.
All kinds of science fiction concepts and speculative concepts are explored there. So maybe just as an experiment, I'm curious, what if we go back through the different episodes of our podcast here? Are there Rick and Morty episodes that explore those same ideas?
Oh, man.
So, our first episode was superheroes and comic books. Are there any...
Well,
what do Rick and Morty have to say about comic books and superheroes?
You know, I mean, there's definitely some superhero types. You know what I was thinking more was like action movie from like the first interdimensional cable episode.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
two brothers. You know, and it's that may be more like late '80s, early '90s action movie.
Yeah. Okay, so Rick and Morty doesn't have much to say about.
I'm trying to think about comic books.
All right, what about pets? And
oh, sure. Well, Snowball and the whole the rise of the dogs.
Right.
Early on, was it episode 2 or something?
Yeah.
For sure, and the fact that what's so good about it is that they gain intelligence, and yet they retain their dogness.
Right.
And I mean, a lot of it's super post-colonial. And this whole rejection of the masters, and this whole and the uprising of the proletariat kind of Marxist sense.
Right.
There's but these are old, like you said, those are old sci-fi tropes for sure. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of like lawnmower man, giving intelligence to a creature or a being that doesn't have it, and seeing what would happen. Right. And the whole reversal at the end when Snowball, is it Snowball or Fluffy? I think it's Snowball. Because he basically renames himself and rejects his slave name.
Yes.
I mean, it's totally post-colonial. And even at the end, I mean, he becomes the leader of this whole dog world. Right. And
do they return to that in other episodes? Or is that just a...
No, but I can't say absolutely no, because the beauty of the show is also a lot of it is in the animation. Right. So there will be small details that if you're rewatching or something, you'll be like, hey, what the hell? And you'll see a character from like a previous, even like another universe or variation of things, and it's pretty wild. So I can't say definitively no, but that's kind of the interesting thing about that show too, is that it definitely has arcs. Yeah. And it follows storylines, but you can also just jump in. Right. Feet first. Right. Head first. You don't need to...
Okay, so what about concepts from Philip K. Dick? Are there any places where the old dickish imagination appears?
Well, I was thinking, because if people have actually been listening to the podcast, they will remember that I did not finish Ubik before our discussion of Philip K. Dick. I have since finished Ubik. And the whole idea of like living in a simulation, or being inside a simulation, this nesting simulations, definitely occurs in an episode where it's actually David Cross is the voice of the antagonist, and they have him inside multiple layers of simulation in order to find the recipe for dark matter. Right. And I would definitely say that the whole idea of Ubik, that there's a spray or a material that was created inside the simulation by participants in the simulation to ward off side effects of something else that exists in the simulation, and it's a spray can. Right. And the whole idea of the advertising at the beginning of every chapter in Ubik that says, tired of always stinking because your deodorant wears off? Try new Ubik spray. Yeah. Use only as recommended. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of stuff, I absolutely see that kind of sentiment
Yeah.
in Rick and Morty.
Which I wonder if that we can extend that out more to just science fiction in modern global capitalism, consumer capitalism, and that absorption of capitalist images for science fiction concepts. So,
well, he's also very. Because he's very. I don't know. He's like a rogue capitalist. He's anti-government, so maybe he's really super libertarian. Because he will constantly be trading on the black market.
You're talking about Rick?
Rick, yeah, and stealing things because they're worth money. He loves Blitz and Chips, which is just this arcade that is, and an arcade is, I mean, how much more really capitalist can you get than like it's basically the juvenile version of a casino.
Oh, there's there's the casino, or not the casino. There's the arcade where you play a human life.
That's Blitz and Chips. Yeah, that's the name of it.
From beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think he definitely. Man, I think he's like super libertarian because he's also the rogue Rick in terms of, well, not the only one, I guess, because there were a few others, but there's like the Citadel of Ricks.
Yeah, I haven't seen
and he
that
constantly is like, these pricks. He's like, they hate the galactic government, so they banded together to form their anti-galactic government. He's like, all they did was form another government.
Right.
And he's railing on them, and he's like, I'm the rickest Rick there is, because he's like, out of, this small variance of metonymy of all of these Ricks, he's the one that stands alone, which is funny because they're all unique in their own way, but he figures himself unique because he doesn't like any form of government, even if it's with variations of himself.
All right.
So there's this economy of personality within the world of Ricks. Like, some of them look down on each other as opposed to others, and yet they're all really the same entity that exists in exact. I mean, the whole principle is that he exists on what's called the central finite curve. Okay. So imagine it like a parabola curve. Okay. There's a lot of everything that is more average would be at the center point, right? But it's a finite gradient because it gets to a point on a parabola where you're never going to, of course, the point of a parabola is you're never going to hit the axis. So there's an infinite number of points on a parabolic line, or a parabolic curve. Just like there are infinite universes in which Ricks exist. But it gets to a point where it's just out of control. They don't make sense. Because in infinity, there's all points are valid.
Right.
But it's going to get to a point where there's only a certain amount in the curve that are sensible.
Right.
So there's but that's, was that is it Aristotle about Achilles and the tortoise?
Yeah. Okay,
so you can never, in that central curve, it's finite because beyond that, there's parameters on the curve that say that outside of this, things don't make much sense, but they still go on forever. And yet within that stretch of curve itself is still infinite. So okay, go ahead.
Well, I kind of want to move in light of that towards maybe analyzing the characters a little bit, just as characters.
Okay.
And I'm curious, why does the Rick of the show live with Morty and his family?
So it's not really okay. It's kind of alluded to at the beginning. It's because he's been gone for a long time,
right?
And his daughter is trying to rebuild this relationship, and is glad to have him living at home.
Sure.
And I guess it comes out at the finale of season 2. Have you seen that with the wedding?
No.
With Birdman?
No.
Or Bird Person, rather. So, okay, Bird Person. Have you met him?
No.
Okay, because he's in previous episodes where they have a house party. It's at the end of season 1. And him and Rick go back as like they're basically like terrorists, and they're wanted because for their anti-government violent leanings,
Right.
which are like alluded to but never really talked about, except for like there's so much blood spilled and all this stuff. But anyway, him and a couple of other people have been like, they're wanted by the Galactic Federation.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it has to do with him coming home and hiding, trying to lay low. But she can't lay low because he's Rick, you know. And,
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't really care, but I don't know. That could also just be just a narrative premise.
Yeah.
Because they only mentioned at the end of season 2. So was that 20 episodes in?
Yeah.
Before that, there's just mention of this long span of time where he's gone.
But what does he get? What does he get from his relationship with Morty?
Oh. Well, there's a technical reason.
Yeah.
And that is because Mortys have a similar like energy field as Rick's do. So when Rick's carry Mortys around with him, it's basically like a psychic stealth device, so that the Galactic Federation can't like track him.
Oh,
so there is actually, and that kind of is very.
That's pretty dark.
The one Philip K. Dick kind of sharing of psychic, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think that then you also sometimes see Rick be really kind of super paternal to Morty and Summer.
Right.
And at the other times he treats them as like, he literally pulls out a whiteboard one time. He's like, let me show you mathematically why you're pieces of shit. You know? Because he's a supreme dick. But then there are times when like he'll be very overly protective and like be loving, and I don't know. I think it's purposefully complicated and convoluted.
Yeah. Well, as I was watching it, something kind of struck with me, which was you kind of allow the show, you kind of allow the premise of this grandfather and grandson going on these adventures a little bit, and are not, you kind of allow that, or you allow yourself to enjoy that, and you kind of defer the question of, like, how horrible all of this really is.
Right.
In part because they are the same person in terms of their voice, right? Justin Roiland
does, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, if they were two different voice actors, I think the show would be too dark and too disturbing.
That's
like, I think the fact that they are one voice talking back and forth amongst itself allows you to enter into the show. It's into the show's really dark universe, in a way that I don't know that you could if it was two different voice actors. That's just kind of a supposition. But I think the fact that both Rick and Morty are really one character in terms of their presentation is really important. Because otherwise, it's just disturbing and really exploitative. And, you know, you can say that it's funny, it's just a joke, or it's just a show. But even something as dark as South Park, it was always filtered in the really dark but good episodes. It's always filtered through the fact that they're kids, and there's a kind of an innocence about even Cartman when he's being his most horrific.
Yeah.
There's an innocence there that allows you to enjoy the darkness of South Park. And there's no innocence in Rick and Morty, but instead what allows you to enjoy it is that rather than being, in terms of how you process the show, rather than being a story of exploitation, it's a kind of a dialectic, an internal dialogue between these two aspects of the same voice. And that makes it palatable in a lot of ways. ways.
That's interesting on a couple levels, I think, because there are several instances that challenge whether one or the other is real to one or the other.
Okay.
Like within the show, which I just think is a really interesting way to kind of extend what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think also there is definitely this strange paternal relationship that really only occurs when you skip generations or you have an alternative symbolic father. Because Jerry, as his father, is inept.
Right.
He is actually more childlike and less emotionally mature than Morty is.
Right.
And yet you have episodes where, okay, like when there's this episode that's like The Purge, and Rick,
I have seen that one.
You have? Okay, so the beginning of it is Rick teaching Morty how to drive, but they're in a spaceship. They don't even realize that Jerry like was in the back and like tagged along. When they do, they have to go drop him off at Jerry daycare. I mean, it really just goes to show that, I mean,
where all
they
the
make
other
it
Jerrys
obvious,
are around.
right? And I think that they really are. They make it obvious at that point. I don't know. I mean, if they intended to originally, but they really took that logic to the end and said, "No, Jerry's a child, and Rick is the substitute father." You know, even though he basically uses him, and there's this whole economy of the relationship of Morty's two Ricks in that universe. I also think it's interesting that relationship when you look at it's very, I think, plainly modeled off of Doc Brown and Marty.
Yes.
I mean, it's Marty and Morty. I mean, it's just literally taken from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I don't think it's straight lifted. They're not stealing. They're blatantly stealing by making it obvious in a way that's ethical. I'm not saying in any way it's unethical. It's just they're taking that relationship and really seeing how far they can take it.
Yeah, when I first encountered it, my thought was it was a show designed to show you that, like, Doctor Who or the character of that mad scientist is actually evil. Or is actually a horrible person.
Right.
That was part of they were exploring the negative side of this archetype of the mad scientist.
They're
that we've seen
with the
before.
benevolent benefactor relationship. Right. Like in Doc Brown, Doctor Who, I would even say some iterations of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, did you see that? There was a newer one that came out recently. It had, like, Daniel Radcliffe in it.
I didn't see it.
And he was Igor, but it really, I started thinking a lot about that Frankenstein-Igor relationship, which is not, obviously, in the novel.
Right.
It actually began in a stage production version of the play. But in a lot of iterations of that relationship, it's the same thing. You have the mad scientist, and who in the novel is really the evil one, and the creature, that's the whole situation in the novel that you're supposed to process through. Whereas in a lot of other iterations, it's the monster's evil, and Frankenstein's misunderstood, and he has this Igor who's his benevolent sidekick.
Right.
I think that starts off a lot of things. That you have Doctor Who would literally lay down his life for his sidekicks. Doc Brown, and that strange relationship, when you really break it down, Marty and Doc have this completely unnarrativized relationship. Their history.
Yeah.
It's unexplained. Like, why this older man and this teenage boy have such a close relationship.
Right.
Is completely bypassed.
Yeah.
And that, because there's a lot of, maybe like, in a cynical way, there's a lot of kind of hidden monstrosity there.
Yeah.
And then a show like Rick and Morty, especially because it's animated, they can then take that and
expose that,
process it out.
Those implications, or that bunch of implications. Yeah. Or another one came to mind is Dad from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Mm-hmm. Or a benevolent one would be maybe Mary Poppins, even.
Sure. There's a whole
benevolent
argument.
Figure coming down and using their magic to sort of raise these raise these children, sort of be a father, mother.
Well, there's a
parent
whole
figure.
argument that Poppins is actually a Time Lord.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a whole. You can look it up.
And her
online. It's
umbrella is her TARDIS. Is that the idea, or what?
Yeah, well, different aspects of things. There's the umbrella, and then the bag is larger on the inside than it is on the outside.
Yeah,
and
of course.
she can just come and go as she wishes. She can out-talk anybody. Like her,
She has some psychic paper.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, there's this whole fan.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
What a good headcanon.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that is the exact same relationship. And she takes the kids off on this adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, it's objectively creepy, but when you participate in it, you're like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah. But this is what gets me about Rick and Morty. And I watched and rewatched this particular episode because to me this kind of encapsulates why I find it disturbing more than I can enjoy it. As much as I really like it, I really can't enjoy it. And this particular episode encapsulates why. It's when it's really on in the first season. Rick makes Morty a love potion that infects the whole world, and
they go Cronenberg.
Everybody goes Cronenberg. They turn into
calling back to body horror,
right? Yeah. Right. They body horror the entire world, and they escape into another world where Rick has just killed Morty and himself. This
on accident, a lab explosion,
right? And that sets up the rest of the show. But what's really interesting about that, to me, that's where the show begins. Like everything up to that, it's kind of a prologue to the show, and that's where the show really begins. And what is really interesting to me about that particular episode is that in that episode, Jerry, in response to Rick's enormous fuck-up, Jerry reestablishes himself as a man and takes back control of his family, and I don't mean control in a negative sense, even he just becomes this
alpha male,
protective, paternal, loving figure. And that is the universe that they have to leave. And that episode is set up.
That's Morty's original universe.
And that's Morty's original universe. So all the universes where Jerry is an inept child is not the reality, the primary reality for the Morty of our show.
Right.
The primary reality for Morty is where his father is actually a father.
But he wasn't. He becomes that way because of the circumstances.
Right. And that...
Which shows that he always has the potential to...
But once they've sort of escaped into that multiverse, that potential doesn't exist anymore.
Well, all the Ricks are designated.
Yeah.
He's Rick C-137. I had to just look it up because I forgot the number. He's Rick from C-37 on the Infinite Finite Curve. Whatever.
Right.
The Earths are the realities are named too, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow, I don't know, there's some crazy conspiracy theory stuff you can look up online because, like I said, there's a lot of detail into the world building, this universe that I think went on. You can actually look up where they take Jerry to daycare.
Mm-hmm.
You can if you stop and pause and zoom the tickets, you can see that it's a different ticket. So the Jerry they pick up is not even the Jerry they left off.
Right.
And there's all kinds of world intersectionalities of these personalities. I agree. The disturbing aspect of that scene that they take over in that world, they just kind of slide in and they bury these bodies.
Yeah.
For me, is later. It's actually in the dog episode, and they go Morty to show Summer that he's not really her Morty. Digs up the bodies and shows her.
Yeah.
And it's just, he's like, I buried myself like how it's so. I mean, just crazy existential.
And that's what I guess that's what I'm talking about is that once that in the end of that episode, when that shift into this multiverse is made, there's something that gets totally buried and lost, and the fact that when you have a multiverse, you can't have character change, right? There can be no real change in terms of character growth because there's not any change in one is just negated by a non-change in another.
Okay, I can see that in a metonymic sense.
Yeah.
But I would also disagree because I think that there are unique aspects of certain characters.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this particular Morty buried himself and took his place, I think is pretty unique. There are other times when all the Mortys are going missing when they first go to like the Citadel at the end of I think season 1, and Morty becomes the one true Morty, freeing all of the other Mortys that have been captured.
Right.
So he is kind of like this. I mean, he assumes this messianic role, which obviously elevates him a little different. But I think it's more important outside of the messianic construct that he stands apart even from other iterations of himself.
Yeah.
And Rick, like I was saying earlier, I think does a lot of the same thing by being extra non-participatory.
Sure.
By purposefully standing alone from all other versions of himself.
Yeah.
I don't know, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. Just like that's the way that I see it. But I can also see your point of view that it definitely limits, because there is no uniqueness ultimately.
Right.
When you have these infinite multiverses and variations of self, if there's an infinite variation, then there's also infinite sameness.
Right.
Ultimately.
Right. And what makes that particularly disturbing for me is in that earlier episode, Rick comes to Morty and says, like, hey, your love is just a chemical reaction. You're going to fall in love, have a kid that you don't really want, and your marriage is going to become horrible, and your marriage is just going to fall apart, like your parents is going to. Mm-hmm. And what you need to do is just forget about all that stuff and dedicate your life to science, like I have. And what's really disturbing about that is that they travel into this multiverse through this sort of, we'll go to the universe where, this episode didn't happen. And really, I mean, by dedicate his life to science, Rick just means join me on my adventures. And Morty does that, right? And they just are now Rick and Morty on all these adventures. But what's interesting is that in that episode, his parents, and in that universe, his parents resolved their difficulties. And
in the one that in the Cronenberg
in the
universe?
Cronenberg one, now they resolve it in terms of just armoring a car and getting a shotgun and just going to save Summer and killing a bunch of Cronenbergs.
But see, I think that points to something that Dr. Richardson talks about in the post-apocalyptic scenario. Mm-hmm. It's basically like a reset button where you get to reestablish a kind of nostalgic version of a past that never existed. So he's basically the head of like an almost nuclear family again. But it can only happen that's happy.
Sure.
That can only happen, though, as a response to all the grotesque madness that's occurring around them. So it's almost as if only by being set apart relatively against what is not that, mm-hmm. that they can kind of recreate that.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm sort of driving at is that from that point on, the show is driven by the utter pointlessness of interpersonal relationship. Like that, like they've left behind what is buried in that episode is belief in any kind of value in relationship. Yeah. And that's the universe that you enter at the end of that episode, and that's what's really disturbing to me.
It's pretty effed.
Yeah.
That's also kind of what makes it appealing, though,
yes,
right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's what allows it to tell such really disturbingly funny stories.
And also you get fart jokes, and you get characters like Mr. Poopy Butthole. Have you seen
that episode? Is incredible,
dude. It's so good.
That episode is incredible.
Like, the false memory, and
that is a very Dickian kind of episode, where you have these false memories that then start to reify and realize themselves.
What's interesting? Go ahead.
And they're always your best memories.
Mm-hmm.
The only
they
memories
can only be good memories.
The only memories that you can be sure are real are unhappy ones.
Right. So we were talking about interpersonal relationships. Their interpersonal relationships in that episode are saved by how much they dislike each other.
Yeah.
It's just so messed up. Like, yeah.
So that's what I find disturbing about it, and that's what takes me out of the enjoyment of it somewhat. Is that every once in a while I'm watching it and I'm just like, this entire show is predicated on a fear that your relationships are meaningless. Now, I mean, they very well, and I'm just saying this not in terms of the show, your relationships may very well be meaningless in some kind of greater cosmic, star exploding, material sense. Sure. But on the sense of where meaning is actually made, I don't think they are. I think...
I kind of disagree with you, because I think what's beautiful about the show is that they do find those moments. And I think part of the appeal of the show, too, is that they don't exploit the goodness between people. They use it sparingly so that it really shines, even if it's a little duller than what we're used to.
Yeah, maybe.
It's fantastic.
It's really worth paying attention to, even if I can't really watch too much of it. Like, it is a strong dose of something.
I love it.
Yeah. All right.
Well, anything else you wanted to say about Rick and Morty?
No, I think that about covers it. I mean, it's some of the best voice acting in a long time. Maybe since Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Yeah. Which I don't think it quite displaces... Archer's good. Archer's quite good.
The voice acting is phenomenal.
Yeah. Archer may be second after Aqua Teens in my particular Hall of Fame. But Rick and Morty's maybe a close third.
I also like Adventure Time, so...
Adventure Time is good.
Tom Kenny is basically... He's not in Archer, but he's in, like, so many great... He voices so many people. I mean, he's in... Adventure Time. He was SpongeBob. He does a lot of work in Rick and Morty. God, he's phenomenal.
Well, Roiland...
He was also in Mr. Show with Bob and David.
Right. Roiland is in Adventure Time as Lemon Grab.
Oh, really?
All the lemon people are Roiland.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. All right, well...
It's another edition of Grad Lads in the case of Summer 37.